To this now, the Gauteng government says it's pulling all the stops to avoid the province's financial day zero, following reports that Gauteng Treasury is racing against time to prevent bankruptcy. Finance and Development MEC Lebogang Maile says the province is hard at work to make up for the 15 billion rand cut in budgets. For more on this story, I am now joined by Professor for Sustainable Development in the School of Public Leadership at Stellenbosch University, Professor Mark Swilling. Professor Swilling, thank you so much for joining us this evening. When we think of day zero as well, when you think about Cape Town's looming day zero a couple of years ago, also I think it was Nelson Mandela Bay who had a looming day zero, but a financial day zero, what does that look like?
A financial day zero is quite simply when an organization runs out of money, just like Cape Town was about to run out of water. And Gauteng has had financial troubles for many years now, and it's reaching ahead at a time when government doesn't have a lot of spare cash to bail them out.
Now, we also heard the MEC citing things like corruption, that, corruption needs to be tackled. And when we think back, he also did mention cases such as, Babita Diokora and the health portfolio as well in the provincial government, who was gunned down, as we know, after she exposed gross corruption in that department. So if we haven't even been able to get the masterminds behind that corruption, how are we going to be able to ensure that it doesn't continue?
Well, I mean, that's the big question that everybody's facing. I think what's interesting about Maile's comments and statement is that it's quite refreshing. He's admitting to the corruption. He's issuing a warning signal that the writing is on the wall. Something needs to change. And hopefully, together with his premier, they're going to be able to crack the whip, backed up by the NPA and other forms of security support and intelligence, in order to really once and for all deal with this challenge. I mean, the Department of Health in the Gauteng in the Gauteng government has been a well-known source of corruption for a very long time. The whistleblower lost her life, and others who we don't know about and tried to blow the whistle have had their lives threatened. And this shows that what we're up against here is not just a few individuals who are corrupt. It's an organized crime syndicate, and this is a form of state capture.
And speaking of that as well, the MEC was saying that, and I want us to play this bite, and basically he was speaking of ways that the provincial government, that his department as well, will try and collect some revenue. Let's take a listen.
There is some money that we'll be able to raise. All we need is to put systems in place. And then there's revenue enhancement. And there are people who've got a lot of proposals and suggestions on how to work with us in enhancing our revenue. We are putting efforts as well there. But like you say, we are not only dependent on this. We are running a tight ship, and we also have some investments that we make from time to time, and so all those resources will be made available for public, for service delivery. So the public can rest assured that we are working very hard, and that Gauteng is well run. It's run properly, so we will not have a collapse in service delivery, because we are vigilant, we are alert, we are focusing on making sure that we don't run into serious problems.
Well, Professor, you heard the MEC there saying that Gauteng is well run, that we will not have a problem, but in the same breath also saying that, look, we have a looming problem here of bankruptcy within at least a space of a year. Now, that is not, these are two contradicting statements.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that he expects people listening to him to be rest assured. that Gauteng is well run. We've known for quite a number of years that that is not true, especially with respect to certain key departments, in particular the Department of Health. And so what we need is a lot more than platitudes. We need a lot more than, rest assured, we run a tight ship, basically trust us. That trust needs to be earned. And the only way that can be done is through tangible interventions that the public can see is aimed at rooting out those who are criminally benefiting from the extraction of funds to the detriment of the public interest. Until specific actions like that are being taken in a coordinated way, the trust that the MEC is requesting there is not going to be forthcoming.
Now, Professor, a big thorn in the provincial government's heel were the e-tolls. And we saw a huge spectacle to turn off the gantries, turn off the e-tolls. But turning off that debt does not go with a light switch just like that as well. I want us to take a listen to what the MEC had to say about the e-tolls.
On Monday, we are paying the first installment, which it's about 3 billion plus. We will give the details. We are paying on Monday. And next year, and this is where those who are saying we might be bankrupt, this is where the story comes in. Next year, June, we're paying the second installment, which will be about 6 billion and all that. So like I said, we are looking at our resources, and there are areas where we are cutting a bit and just reprioritizing, but we're also looking at our own savings and all that so that we can meet all our demands.
Now, you heard him there talking about, of course, the payments that they have to make regarding the e-tolls as well. And going back to what I had mentioned earlier before that buy, to say when that was scrapped, there was a lot of welcoming from residents, of course, in Gauteng, but also civil society groups who had fought very hard to get this scrapped, to get the e-tolls scrapped as well. But it seems it's coming back to bite us.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were strategic mistakes made at the very beginning of the process to procure a system that was operated and financed in a way that did not elicit the trust and confidence of the users. And research shows all over the world that these kinds of toll road systems have to be trusted in order for them to be able to work properly. And from the beginning, there was very low trust of how the whole system had been designed, procured, and set up. And eventually, through civil society action and then government realizing that they're not going to be able to collect the money, the whole thing was basically scrapped and a debt financing deal put in place. Central government and provincial government were on the hook for that. Yes. And we're going to be paying for that through as taxpayers over time. The benefit is we have a fairly good road system, but we don't really know how to continue to pay for it. So it continues to be well maintained and operated.
It sounds like the MEC is saying that, look, we will use other mechanisms, dip into our savings, and also try and trim the fat as well to ensure that we pay for the strategic mistake. But ultimately, as you're saying, Professor, as the residents of Gauteng, we will feel that pinch too, because ultimately we will have to pay for it somehow. After the second payment is made of 6 billion rand, which will be in 2025, that's also around about the period where he's also projecting that we will reach complete bankruptcy. So do we get to a point where we choose whether we're going to pay off our e-tolls debt or we're going to service the provincial finance government?
Well, it may come to that. And if it does, then what national government will have to face is the prospect of a debt default. And they can't afford that. So one way of reading what is going on here is brinkmanship, where the provincial government was implicated in a deal which it can't really afford, and is trying to issue warnings in a very politically unstable and sensitive province, issue warnings to say, listen, we could collapse, thus forcing central government to intervene. Don't forget, our provincial governments are not really fully fledged governments. They don't have their own tax bases. They are dependent on transfers from the national tax base via the national budget. And the large majority of their funds get spent on social welfare, on health, and on education. Those three are the big expenditures. And there are equivalent national departments for those services. So the worst comes to the worst is if provincial government does collapse, which technically I can't see how that works. There are national departments that step in. So we need to maybe read between the lines of what's going on here. Is this, for example, provincial government trying to force the hand of national government to step in and save them?
Yeah, we will wait and see. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Mark Swilling.